Welcome to her whisper, where every story reveals hidden truths of love, family, and resilience. And now, let me tell you a story you won't forget. The champagne flute slipped from my hand and shattered against the marble floor, the sharp crack cutting through the music and laughter. In an instant, the entire ballroom at the Carter estate fell silent. This is the family embarrassment we're stuck with. The words came from Emily, my brand new daughter-in-law, delivered with a smile so perfectly polished it felt rehearsed. Her manicured hand brushed my shoulder ever so lightly, but her tone carried the weight of a blade. 200 guests turned to stare. Every gaze landed on me, a 55-year-old widow in a modest navy dress, wearing only my grandmother's pearl necklace. Not flashy, not extravagant, just simple, deliberate, invisible. Across the room, Richard Carter, Emily's father, froze. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips, and his face drained of color until it matched the crisp white of his tuxedo shirt. His eyes locked on mine, and I recognized the look immediately. Not shock, recognition. And in that moment, I understood. Tonight wasn't just about a cruel remark or a broken glass. Tonight was about to unravel secrets I had kept buried for more than a decade. Secrets that could change everything. My name is Linda Parker. For the past 15 years, I've mastered the art of being strategically invisible. And while people may underestimate a woman who chooses to blend quietly into the background, what they don't realize is that invisibility can be the most powerful disguise of all. But Emily's little performance that night didn't just draw attention to me. It lit a spark that would expose a past I had worked tirelessly to protect, and force everyone in that glittering ballroom to see me in a way they never had before. Back in my quiet apartment the next morning, I sat with a cup of coffee, replaying every detail of what had happened at the reception. Emily's smug remark, the crash of glass, Richard Carter's ashen face when he recognized me. It all echoed in my mind like a storm that wouldn't settle. For 15 years, I had lived behind a carefully constructed curtain of privacy. Most people assumed I was a modest widow, living comfortably on my late husband's pension and a bit of insurance. That was the story I had allowed to exist, and until last night, no one had reason to question it. But the truth was very different. It began with my late husband, Tom Parker. We were both engineers once, working in Silicon Valley when the tech world was still young and restless. In 2010, Tom designed a power management system that transformed smartphone battery efficiency. At first, we thought it might earn us a decent retirement, maybe a safety net for our son Michael. We had no idea we were sitting on a fortune. When the patent sold in 2012, the check was for $22 million. $22 million. It felt unreal, like Monopoly money. Numbers too large to belong to us. Michael was just 24 then, fresh out of graduate school, full of plans for his marketing career. Tom and I made a choice that day, a choice that would shape everything that followed. We told Michael we had received a comfortable settlement, enough to live without worry, but nothing excessive. He never questioned it. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that the $22 million was just the beginning. Tom had a gift for spotting opportunities. Together, we invested carefully at first. Blue chip stocks, safe real estate. As we grew more confident, we ventured further. Growth companies, tech startups with strong fundamentals, undervalued businesses waiting for the right touch. Slowly, steadily, the numbers multiplied. By the time Tom died in 2020, we weren't simply comfortable. We were worth more than $800 million. $800 million. And I had been the one who acquired Carter Holdings 2 years later. After Richard's reckless expansion nearly sank the family empire, he believed he was selling to a corporate firm. What he didn't know was that the firm was my shell company. I didn't buy his business out of spite. I bought it because beneath his mismanagement, it was still strong, still salvageable. Under my oversight, it thrived again. The irony was almost cruel. While Emily had eyed me across dinner tables, wondering if I could manage my expenses in old age, her family had been living off the stability I quietly created. Her father's consulting fees, their lavish parties, even the estate where the wedding was held. Those things survived because of me. That's the thing most people don't understand about wealth. Real wealth doesn't always look like diamonds and designer gowns. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a simple dress, driving a reliable sedan, who smiles politely when underestimated. That was my greatest strength. Until last night. Because when Richard Carter's eyes locked on mine across that ballroom, I saw recognition. I saw memory. He remembered the boardroom meeting 3 years ago. The quiet woman in a navy dress who let her lawyers do the talking. He hadn't cared enough to ask my name then. But now, at his daughter's wedding, he knew exactly who I was. And for the first time in 15 years, my invisibility was gone. The morning after the wedding, I barely slept. My mind kept circling back to Richard Carter's face, the way his eyes had narrowed in recognition. By sunrise, I knew the curtain I had hidden behind for years had finally begun to tear. At 7 o'clock sharp, Michael showed up at my apartment, still in yesterday's suit, his tie loose, his expression tight. He paced the living room like a man trapped in a cage. "Mom, you have to tell me what that was about," he demanded. "After you left," Richard pulled me aside. He asked me questions about Dad's patents, about you, about our finances. He seemed to think you were... He stopped himself, shaking his head as if the words were too ridiculous to say aloud. "He seemed to think you were some kind of investor." I stirred sugar into my coffee, buying myself a few seconds. People say strange things at weddings. Michael, he didn't laugh. His eyes, Tom's eyes, fixed on me, serious and searching. It wasn't just strange. Mom, it was like he knew something. I had spent years building a world where Michael never had to worry about my choices or my money. He had worked hard for everything he had. A career, a home, a life built on his own merit. That was the point. That was why Tom and I kept the truth buried. But Richard's words had cracked the seal. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the table. A text message glowed across the screen. "Linda, let's have lunch today. Michael and I would like to talk with you. Emily." I slid the phone across the table for my son to see. His jaw clenched as he read it. "She was asking questions last night, too," he muttered. "About our family, about money. Emily Carter was clever. Too clever for her own good. And she wasn't the type to let a mystery linger." "What do you think she wants?" Michael asked. I took a slow sip of coffee. Though the taste had turned bitter, "I think your wife has sharper instincts than we gave her credit for. And she's not going to stop until she gets answers." Michael's phone rang then, Emily's name flashing across the screen. He answered, and I could hear her voice even from where I sat. Sweet, cheerful, but edged with intent. "Michael, darling, I thought it would be lovely if the three of us had lunch today. There are family matters I'd like to discuss with your mother now that we're officially related." When he hung up, he looked at me with that same expression he wore as a boy caught breaking curfew. Half guilty, half afraid. "Mom," he said quietly, "is there something you need to tell me about our family's finances?" Outside the window, commuters hurried to work with ordinary worries. Deadlines, meetings, bills. I envied them their simplicity. Because for me, the time for invisibility was over. I set my cup down and looked at my son. "Michael," I said softly, "I think it's time you knew everything." Emily arrived 45 minutes early to the restaurant she had chosen, the most expensive place in town. When Michael and I walked in, she was already seated at a corner table, perfectly positioned to survey the entire room. "Linda, Michael," she said brightly, standing to embrace us both. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes, those sharp green eyes, measured everything. My plain black dress, my modest jewelry, even the way I carried myself. She noticed it all. "I ordered us a Bordeaux," she added, motioning to the half-empty bottle on the table. I thought it would be a perfect way to celebrate our new family. The wine cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. It wasn't hospitality. It was theater. "This is very thoughtful," I said evenly as I settled into my chair, though a bit extravagant for a casual lunch. "Oh, Linda," Emily replied with that practiced laugh. "Nothing about our family is casual anymore." The waiter poured our glasses, and once he left, Emily leaned forward, her tone dropping. "I had a very interesting conversation with Daddy last night. He told me some fascinating stories about corporate acquisitions and a certain mysterious investor who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Emily, what does that have to do with lunch? She ignored him, her attention locked on me. You know, Linda, I studied finance at Wharton. I've always been fascinated by shell companies, discreet investors, anonymous transactions, the kind of work that requires strategic invisibility. Her gaze was pointed, her words deliberate. That sounds reasonable, I said calmly, lifting my glass. Emily smiled, but it was sharp, a predator's smile. Daddy remembered something from when Carter Holdings was acquired. He said the woman in the boardroom hardly spoke, let her lawyers handle everything. Quiet, elegant, a woman who seemed used to making decisions others underestimated. Michael's eyes flicked to me, confusion clouding his face as the pieces began to fit together. Mom, he whispered. Before I could respond, Emily reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She laid it on the table and turned the screen toward us. It was a news clipping from 3 years ago. An article about the Carter Holdings acquisition. The photo was grainy, faces blurred by motion. But there, tucked between lawyers and executives, stood a woman in a navy dress. My dress, my posture, my face, barely visible, but visible enough. The quality isn't perfect, Emily said lightly, as though she were making casual conversation. But don't you think the resemblance is striking? The silence stretched, thick and unyielding. Michael stared at the photo, then at me, the realization dawning in his expression. I set my glass down carefully. That's quite a coincidence, isn't it? Emily's voice was honey, but her eyes glittered with triumph. Of course, coincidences happen all the time. Like how my family's financial troubles began right around the time someone paid $800 million for Daddy's company, and how that investor disappeared immediately afterward. Almost as if she preferred to stay anonymous. Michael's hand trembled as he placed his wine glass back on the table. Mom, he said, his voice raw. Please tell me you're not who she thinks you are. I looked at my son, at the boy I had raised into a man who valued honesty above all else, and realized 15 years of carefully guarded secrets were unraveling. Emily leaned back in her chair, satisfied. She thought she had won, but she had no idea what she had just unleashed. 2 days after that disastrous lunch, I sat across from James Harrison, my longtime financial advisor. His office was all polished wood and quiet authority, the kind of place where people spoke in measured tones, even when the ground was shifting beneath them. Linda, James said, adjusting his glasses as he scrolled through the files I'd requested. This is an unusual request. Why the sudden interest in your daughter-in-law's family finances? Because, James, I replied, I have reason to believe Emily has been digging into mine. His brows rose slightly, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned his monitor toward me. You were right to be cautious. Someone's been making discreet inquiries about shell corporations, acquisition structures, anonymous investors, not casual curiosity. Linda, these are professional-level questions. My stomach tightened. How professional? Professional enough to suggest she's hired help. I'd wager she's working with a private investigator, possibly even an attorney. I leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to remain calm. Of course Emily wouldn't be satisfied with vague suspicions. She was a Carter, ambitious, entitled, relentless. James tapped a key, and another file appeared. Here's where it gets more interesting. The Carters' financial situation isn't as stable as it looks. The estate, mortgaged to nearly 80% of its value. Their investment accounts, systematically drained over the past 3 years to maintain appearances. Credit obligations stacked higher than I expected. I felt the bitter taste of irony in my mouth. So while Emily has been eyeing my pearls and department store dresses, her own family has been living on borrowed time and borrowed money. He nodded. Richard thought the sale of Carter Holdings would carry them indefinitely. But most of his so-called retirement income, consulting fees, board stipends, those come directly from positions you arranged through new management after you acquired the company. Without you, they'd be struggling. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of it. Emily had been so eager to expose me, to paint me as a liar, But the truth was simpler, sharper. Her family's comfort rested on my decisions. And there's one more thing, James added, sliding a folder across the desk. She's opened several new lines of credit in the last month. My guess, she's financing her little investigation, banking on a payoff once she corners you. I flipped the folder open, scanning the records. Payments to Ashford Private Investigations. Retainer fees for a law firm specializing in family wealth disputes. Emily hadn't just been suspicious. She was building a case. She doesn't want answers, I murmured. She wants leverage. James studied me carefully. What are you going to do? I gathered the documents, slid them back into the folder, and stood. My reflection in his polished desk caught my eye. Calm, deliberate, the woman I had taught myself to be. I'm going to do what I've always done, I said. Get ahead of the game, because Emily Carter may think she's clever, but she has no idea who she's playing against. When I left James's office, the city streets felt sharper, louder, alive with tension. 15 years of carefully cultivated privacy had cracked, and now it was war. The following evening, Michael arrived at my apartment with Emily in tow. They carried themselves like diplomats, about to enter a delicate negotiation. I had prepared for the meeting with quiet precision. Nothing flashy, just a modest cheese plate, a simple bottle of wine, and the calm of someone who had been anticipating this moment for years. Mom, thank you for agreeing to sit down with us, Michael began, his voice measured, almost formal. I know the last few days have been complicated. Emily was dressed for business, a tailored navy suit, pearls at her throat, a leather portfolio in her hands. She took her seat across from me like she owned the room. Linda, she said smoothly, I want to start by saying this is about family. Everything we discussed tonight stays within these walls. We're all on the same side here. I almost smiled at her presumption. Of course. Dear, tell me what's on your mind. She opened the portfolio, sliding out neatly prepared documents. I've been thinking a lot since our lunch, and I realized we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. What I'd like to propose is a more collaborative approach to family financial planning. Michael frowned. Emily, but she pressed on, her tone confident. Family wealth works best when it's managed strategically across generations. We were thinking of establishing a family foundation. It would provide tax benefits, strengthen our philanthropic image, and most importantly, create transparency. I took a sip of wine, letting her continue. The foundation would be controlled by a board of trustees, she explained eagerly. You, me, and Michael. Equal votes, equal say in how resources are managed and distributed. It's democratic, strategic, future-focused. Her voice was sugar, but her intent was steel. And what kind of initial funding were you imagining? I asked lightly. She leaned forward, eyes glittering. Something substantial. 50, maybe 60 million. Enough to establish credibility and influence immediately. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Emily, this is a lot. Actually, I interrupted gently. I think your wife has put considerable thought into this. I set my glass down, folded my hands, and met Emily's gaze directly. But before we talk about family planning, I'd like to ask a question. Her smile flickered. Of course. Do you love my son? The air in the room changed. Emily blinked, her composure wobbling for the first time. Excuse me. It's a simple question. Do you love Michael for who he is? Or do you love what you think being married to him might provide? Silence. Heavy, unyielding silence. Michael looked between us, alarm widening his eyes. That's unfair, Emily said finally, her voice brittle. Is it? I reached for the folder on the coffee table, the one I had prepared earlier. I laid it open and slid a few pages across to her. Because according to these records, you recently hired Ashford Private Investigations. You retained a law firm specializing in family wealth disputes, and you opened 3 new lines of credit to pay for it all. Does that sound like love to you, Emily, or strategy? Her face went pale. Michael's head snapped toward her. You did what? It's not what it looks like, she stammered. I was just trying to protect us. To protect our family? Our family, I said softly. Or your inheritance. I spread more documents across the table. Financial profiles James had compiled of the Carter family. Mortgaged estate, depleted accounts, mounting debts. Your family has been living on borrowed time and borrowed money for years. And yet here you are, demanding control of resources you didn't earn. Michael stared at his wife, betrayal etched in every line of his face. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the sound of Emily's quickened breathing. Finally, I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. You came here tonight expecting control, Emily. But what you've given me instead is proof. Proof that this marriage was never about love. It was about access. Her mask cracked then, and for the first time, I saw not the polished bride but the desperate schemer beneath. And in that moment, I knew. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was war. The night after our confrontation, Michael moved back to his apartment. He said he needed space, but I could see the storm in his eyes. 15 years of trust between us had been shaken in a single evening. Emily, on the other hand, didn't retreat. She escalated. The first sign came on Friday morning when James Harrison called me, his voice unusually sharp. "Linda, we have a problem," he said without preamble. "Someone has been making inquiries with the SEC about your investment structures. Not casual questions, formal ones. They're building a case." I gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of case?" "Potential disclosure violations. Insider trading allegations. Shell company scrutiny. Your structure's illegal. Linda, but they're complex. To an outsider, they can look suspicious." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Emily hadn't just been prying. She was trying to weaponize the system against me. "How serious is this?" I asked. James hesitated. "If they file a complaint, you could face months, maybe years of investigation. Even if you're cleared, the publicity alone would destroy your privacy." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had hidden my wealth to protect Michael. Now that secret threatened to ruin us both. That afternoon, Michael came by, looking worn, his face shadowed with sleeplessness. "Mom," he said, voice heavy. "Emily filed for separation. Her lawyer says she's protecting herself from financial liabilities." I should have felt relief. Instead, the words cut deeper than I expected. My son's marriage was crumbling, and I was the wedge Emily was using to pry it apart. "She told me," Michael went on, "that you've been manipulating everyone's lives while pretending to be someone you're not. That you control my father-in-law's income. That you control me. She says you're ruthless." I set down my coffee cup carefully, steadying my voice. "Do you believe her?" He didn't answer right away. His silence was worse than accusation. Finally, he whispered, "I don't even know who you are anymore." I wanted to reach for him, to remind him I was still the same woman who raised him, who kissed his scraped knees and sat through his first heartbreak. But the distance between us felt vast, filled with 15 years of secrets I could no longer justify. "Michael," I said softly, "there are things I never told you because I wanted you to stand on your own. I never wanted my success to cast a shadow over yours." His eyes were glassy, wounded, and look how that turned out. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. A new message flashed across the screen, cold and deliberate. "Mrs. Parker, this is Marcus Webb, legal counsel for Emily Carter. My client has filed complaints with federal regulators regarding your financial activities. We will be in touch regarding next steps." I stared at the message, my heart steadying with a strange clarity. Emily wasn't backing down. She wasn't satisfied with suspicion or exposure. She wanted to destroy me. And if she thought I would surrender everything I'd built without a fight, she was about to learn just how ruthless I could be. The conference room felt more like a battlefield than a meeting. At the polished mahogany table sat Emily, her attorney Marcus Webb, and her parents, Richard and Patricia Carter. On my side, James Harrison, calm as ever, and Michael, pale and silent. "Let's be clear," Marcus began, sliding a thick folder across the table. "My client believes Mrs. Parker has concealed substantial assets while allowing her son's wife's family to suffer financial hardship. This suggests a pattern of manipulation and potential misconduct." James didn't flinch. "Mrs. Parker's activities are entirely legal. These so-called complaints are rooted in personal grievances, not regulatory concerns." Emily leaned forward, her voice smooth but sharp. "This isn't personal. It's about responsibility. Families don't hide billions of dollars from each other." I finally spoke. My voice was low, steady. "Emily, I never owed your family my money. I never owed you explanations. What I owed was to my husband's memory and to my son. And I've kept those promises." Her lips curved into a cold smile. "You let my father believe he failed as a businessman. Your father did fail," I replied evenly. "I saved his company. Without me, Carter Holdings would be nothing but ashes." Richard shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't deny it. He couldn't. Marcus cleared his throat. "Mrs. Parker, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll pursue this through regulatory channels. These investigations can take years. Are you prepared for that?" I looked around the table at Emily's defiance, Marcus's calculation, Richard's unease, Michael's wounded silence, and made my decision. "I have a counter-proposal," I said. "Emily, you withdraw every complaint within 72 hours. In return, I'll provide a settlement that allows you and your parents to maintain your lifestyle without ever involving me or my son again." Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of settlement?" $5 million, one payment. After that, you disappear from our lives completely." The room went silent. Michael's head snapped toward me in shock. "Mom, but I didn't look at him." My eyes stayed locked on Emily. $5 million, she repeated slowly. "To walk away from Michael." "That's correct." Marcus was already calculating. He knew $5 million guaranteed today was better than years of costly litigation, with no certainty of victory. Emily, however, looked torn, pride wrestling with greed. Michael's voice cracked. "Emily, just answer me. Did you ever love me? Or was I only ever a stepping stone?" The silence stretched, unbearable. Emily looked away first. That was all the answer Michael needed. By the next morning, Marcus called James to confirm. The papers were signed. The funds transferred. Emily Carter accepted the settlement and vanished, leaving nothing but ashes of a marriage that had never been built on love. Michael filed for divorce within a week. 6 months later, he called me on a quiet Sunday evening. "Mom," he said, his voice lighter than it had been in months. "I met someone. Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher. She doesn't know anything about our family's money. I told her you live in a nice apartment and drive a reliable car. You know what she said? She said that sounds like a woman with her priorities straight." For the first time in a long while, I felt something ease inside me. "She sounds perfect. When do I get to meet her?" "Next Sunday," Michael said. Then, after a pause, "But Mom, when you meet her, can you just be the woman who raised me? Leave the tycoon at home." I laughed. The sound soft but real. "Deal! But if she starts investigating our finances, all bets are off." For the first time in years, the future felt exactly as I had planned it. Not loud, not showy, but strong, steady, and ours, because invisibility had kept me safe. But now, finally, I understood the power of choosing when to be seen. Thank you so much for watching this story until the end. If there were any shortcomings, I sincerely apologize. Your support means the world and gives me strength to keep sharing more heartfelt stories. Don't forget to subscribe to Her Whisper and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. See you in the next video.